The carbon cycle is an extremely significant cycle for Earth, as it is the main route of transfer of energy from one organism to another. The cycle also greatly impacts our atmosphere.
Photosynthesis is the first step in the global carbon cycle. Plants use carbon and atmospheric CO2 to make sugars and other carbohydrates to grow and reproduce. Plants are the basic building blocks of fuel as they act as the original source of food. Plants supply humans and animals with building blocks for molecules and fuel. In any ecosystem and food chain, the plant is usually consumed by animals. During photosynthesis in plants, the carbon in the atmosphere is taken in through tiny pores in the leaves of plants, and at the same time, oxygen is released into the atmosphere. All animals and humans have a function called respiration. Respiration makes two waste products, carbon dioxide and water. Animals remove carbon dioxide from their body when they exhale, and inhale oxygen released by plants. During photosynthesis in plants, the carbon in the atmosphere is taken in through tiny pores in the leaves of plants, and at the same time, oxygen is released into the atmosphere. All animals and humans have a function called respiration. Respiration makes two waste products, carbon dioxide and water. Animals remove carbon dioxide from their body when they exhale, and inhale oxygen released by plants. The animals are eaten by other predators in the food chain. All humans and animals obtain food, specifically glucose from plants in a food chain, as plants create their own glucose. Another path that the carbon cycle can take is after the death of an animal or plant. When organisms die, their bodies, which include carbon, are broken down and consumed by decomposers. In this process, the decomposers release carbon back into the atmosphere. At the same time, the deceased plant and animal materials may also stay in the rocks, later being available as fossil fuel in the future for combustion. Over the course of humanity, mankind has built many factories and industries based on extracting fossil fuels and burning them to provide energy. The burnt fossil fuels include the deceased plant and animal materials and fossils that have died, as well as oil, coal, and natural gases. The process of extracting fossil fuels causes fossil fuel emissions. Fossil fuel emissions are the largest emissions of carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere and it accumulates in the atmosphere as plants are unable to use such high amounts of carbon dioxide in photosynthesis.
In the end, the carbon returns to the atmosphere after it has either been released through decomposition of living organisms or through human extraction of fossil fuels. The animals are eaten by other predators in the food chain. All humans and animals obtain food, specifically glucose, from plants in a food chain, as plants create their own glucose. The carbon along with sugars are transferred from prey to predator, and the death of each organism also releases carbon. For example, the cow is turned into food for humans, and the carbon inside the cow is transferred to humans. The carbon cycle affects marine life as well. Carbon dioxide is able to enter the marine ecosystem where carbon is dissolved in the water. The carbon sinks very slowly and usually moves from colder areas to warmer areas, such as oceans near the equator. The deep, cold oceans do well to contain the carbon dioxide, but carbon dioxide tends to move towards warmer areas underwater. Carbon rises in the water when it comes into contact with warmer temperatures. At some point, the lake, ocean, or pond is unable to hold the carbon and releases it into the atmosphere in the form of bubbles. Photosynthesis also takes place in the marine ecosystem. In the marine ecosystem, instead of plants, oceans have phytoplankton and algae. They are the living organisms capable of photosynthesis. Phytoplankton and algae consume dissolved carbon dioxide in the ocean, and while they keep the carbon, they separate and release the oxygen from CO2. Sea creatures like land creatures also perform respiration. When the sea creatures are respiring, the carbon dioxide released through the respiration can go back to the phytoplankton and algae, or can dissolve into the deep oceans and be released later on back into the atmosphere. Marine life such as shrimp, shellfish, and small fish can consume the phytoplankton and algae, allowing the carbon to move up the food chain. When marine life dies, their bodies sink into the bottom of the ocean. From there, it is either decomposed and is biodegraded by bacteria on the ocean floor, releasing carbon back into the surface, or becomes part of the rock formation on the ocean floor if it is unable to be decomposed. The rates of the carbon cycle can take different amounts of time based on whether it is a slow carbon cycle, a fast carbon cycle, or a cycle based on human emissions. The slow carbon cycle is the process in which carbon moves between rocks, soil, ocean, and atmosphere. It takes around 100 to 200 million years for a complete cycle. On average, 10 to 100 million metric tons of carbon dioxide move through the slow carbon cycle every year. Human emissions are the second fastest method in which carbon moves around the Earth. Around 1 million metric tons of carbon move around the human emission cycle every year. The fast carbon cycle is the process in which carbon moves from one organism to another through photosynthesis, respiration, and consuming the carbon of one organism. 1,000 to 100,000 million metric tons of carbon move through the fast carbon cycle every year. Plants and phytoplankton are the most important organisms of the fast carbon cycle. With more plants and phytoplankton, more carbon can be moved over the course of a year in the carbon cycle.